All right, good morning. I guess this is my second attempt at this. We'll see how it goes. It is Friday, July 24th. It's just before 9 a.m. Been enjoying a leisure morning, sort of reading my phone and drinking coffee, and I'm coming out to do some choring. We had today, normally I would be at work, but I took yesterday and today off to catch up on some chores, and here I am. 2 days ago, we had a summer squall that came through. Really put down some rain, not enough to make much of a difference, but maybe the grass will green up a little bit. And I'm heading out to weed the strawberries right now. So I'll take you through my process. I'm kind of suited up right here. I got on my coveralls. I've got my leather gloves because I might have to pull some thistle. Here's my straw hat to keep the sun out of my eyes. And yeah, let's get to it. This is a bigger strawberry patch. I think it's 4 feet wide by 42 feet long, I do believe. We have three varieties of what are called June bearing strawberries. Strawberries come in two basic varieties or two basic types. There are ever bearing and June bearing. Uh, as the name implies, June bearing strawberries come on all at once, usually in June, and then you harvest them. And so the growth cycle of the plant and the growth cycle of the fruit are separate from each other. Ever bearing, which is normally what you'll see if you go to like the Home Depot or something, have been bred to continue that growth cycle continuously, so they can produce a fruit. We actually have in one of our gardens, we have a strawberry island that is ever bearing, just for grazing purposes. By grazing purpose, I mean that I can go out there and just eat from the plant. And the June bearing ones that I'll be weeding here momentarily are for harvesting. Um, Whenever you disturb the soil, one of the problems you have when you're gardening or farming or whatever is disturbing the soil like you would do for plants also creates an environment that is conducive to some kinds of invasive weeds, invasive plant species. All right, I've got my bucket here. Everything looks good. We've got some thistle that is starting to mature and starting to flower, so I have to get it out of here. Thistle is very thorny, so that's what I use the leather gloves for, to pull this out. All right, so here I am down on my knees. Today I wanted to talk more about permaculture, and what that means and what my relationship with it is. So the idea of permaculture, the term, comes from a dude named Bill Mollison, who was a farmer, sort of, I'm not sure how big his operation was, in Australia and New Zealand. So he comes from the southern hemisphere, where he started his operations. And permaculture often is really this idea of, I don't know, more direct involvement with the land. I guess I think I mentioned it in my recording a couple days ago that um, it's about how you live more succinctly and closely with the land in a healthier way, to not remove yourself from your food production, and to more closely um, guard the food supply and what that means with living with it. I guess fundamental is the idea that living closer to your food, managing your own food, managing the land in a sustainable way is a healthier and more psychologically correct way to live. And that's a principle I basically agree with. Um, so they wrote some books, and then they had classes, and permaculture has kind of permeated in, especially among the left leaning agriculture. It's funny, those fundamental different views. of conservatism versus liberalism, which are ideas that aren't political. They've just always been with us. There's a conservative approach to agriculture, and it tends to be more about preserving traditional ways of doing things. And by traditional ways, they're not really saying, okay, the way we used to farm in the 16th century. They're more about continuity of their farming culture. This is not a criticism at all. And the left-leaning gardeners and farmers tend to be about, okay, we're going to reinvent agriculture or to be more sustainable and more. Man, she does not want to give up her roots. This one, uh, more sustainable and and maybe innovative. Kind of I think one of the big problems that people on the left in this space have is that there seems to be an underlying disdain for current agriculture practices. I get it. I mean, they're heavily reliant on diesel fuel in terms of tractors, and heavy reliant on imported and mined fertilizers and other like non-sustainable practices, where rather than worry about like soil regeneration and keeping the soil healthy, the idea is more just pour chemicals on it. So get stuff from Monsanto, get chemicals and seeds that have been genetically engineered to work together. I think some of those ideas the left finds repugnant, which is sort of understandable. But I would say my biggest criticism of that is oftentimes the people who are passionate about and talking about it clearly are not practitioners of agriculture, so they tend to get some elements wrong. So I wish there was more informed criticism and less um, sort of dogmatic, automatically suggesting that if you're in agriculture right now, you don't care about the land, you're a conservative, you're MAGA, all these conclusions that get jumped to that keep a divide among people who are ostensibly doing exactly the same thing. I will say before I paint it grim, when you go to the animal auctions or go to a feed store, like politics don't really come up that often. You can tell out here on the West Coast there are left leaning like feed stores. Like locally, we have a co-op called Wilco, and there are right leaning places. So like Coastal and some of those places, you'll see. What do I mean? You'll see more like clothing that have like uh, flags and things all over it. Sort of the which aesthetic do they appeal to? But there's a lot of stuff, like people. If you wear like Carhartt, that's not um, that's not a marker of the left versus the right. But unfortunately and sadly, sort of the American flag, not just like not displaying the American flag. I think people on the left do that, but the wearing of the American flag as base apparel is a real marker between the left and the right. But I digress. So permaculture is really sort of to tie these thoughts together is kind of a left leaning ideal on agriculture, and it's progressive in that sense, meaning they're looking to the future practices, future things to help make agriculture more sustainable. And I think that's a noble endeavor. I don't have any problem with it, but I do think there should be a balance between the two, meaning you need to look to the past and see, why did humanity do this thing sometimes for thousands of years, and in the post World War II and industrial revolution, we sort of abandoned some of those methods for some newer technologies, some of them proving to be good and some of them proving to be harmful to the landscape in the long run. And that's the challenge. So permaculture, um, probably the biggest criticism I have of it is most of the permaculture business out there seems to be selling access to permaculture training and these permaculture sort of workshops. I see people saying, I'm a certified permaculturist. And a lot of those, as I've looked at them and looked at their curriculum and looked at the background of the teachers, are really sort of landscape architecture classes. And not that I have issue with landscape architecture. It's just that it's clear sometimes some of the purveyors of permaculture philosophy and theory out there are coming at it more from a landscape perspective rather than an animal husbandry perspective or a farming or gardening perspective. And it seems that sometimes their thoughts and beliefs, in my opinion, are a little bit naive or unpracticed with the reality of growing stuff in the ground. That's probably my secondary concern. The first one I sort of implied is it becomes a business. It becomes influencers trying to sell their mode. And I've seen online sometimes some of the most popular permaculture practitioners are practicing like in the tropics, like in Costa Rica and places like that, which is interesting, but not really applicable if you're trying to homestead in Montana. Those are two entirely different environments, two entirely different approaches and schemes. So, one of the principles of permaculture that I really dig with, that I think is important, is the idea of interconnected systems. And as we talk through things that are going on here at my farm, you'll see how that is a driving force, which of course makes it, I believe, better and more sustainable and more workable in the long run. But in the short run, makes it harder to set up. And the reason is, if you have, these 15 or 20 interconnected systems, you can't build them all simultaneously. So you of necessity have things that are kind of half-assed. For example, you might put in the gutters on a new shed or a chicken coop or something with the intent of harvesting the rainwater. But when you're building that chicken shed, your primary concern is the health and well-being of the chickens, and then getting the chickens in there and taking care of them. And that's going to take precedent over doing the water collection system. So you kind of have to build it anticipating what you're doing next, knowing that you're not going to have the time on any given weekend to implement everything simultaneously. And then the reality happens is you build your chicken coop with the intent of building that like water containment system. But as soon as you get down to the chicken coop and you have your chickens in, then something else might take over as priority. Now it's time to harvest the apples, or now it's time to, plant, or now it's time to harvest something else, or you've got a roof that needs to be repaired, or. So you're constantly balancing the immediate needs of things breaking down, or the seasonality of the work, with trying to build the system up. And I think in the next few weeks, I want to talk about that topic a little bit more, um, of trying to actually progress things. I think for me, and this is a concept I like about permaculture, because you're talking about these integrated systems. You are focusing on multiple things simultaneously. And I have kind of an ADHD mind. So one of the things that appeals to me about this is the variety of it. I think for some people, it would drive them crazy because you're constantly going from a watering system to clearing brush to taking care of the chickens to taking care of the rabbits to harvesting the berries to now you've got some kind of disease that has shown up. Now you've got an infestation of moles. Now you've got an infestation of ants. And you're just moving from thing to thing to thing to thing. And I think for some people that can be very exhausting because nothing is ever done. So if you are a absolutely well-ordered person who likes their world regimented, I think this lifestyle would be very difficult for you because you would constantly, or everybody does, constantly feel behind, and you've got to be able to live with that in your soul of saying, this is what I can do this week. This is what I can do this weekend. And if I don't get it done, I don't get it done. For example, as we're expanding fruit production here, I have to be copacetic with letting fruit just fall on the ground and rot. That if I'm constantly shaking myself up or saying, I can't, I have to keep my life in balance, which again is a permaculture principle. Meaning I have my primary job and that has to take precedent because that's what pays for my health care and that's what pays for my retirement and that's what pays for the insurance for me and the kids and all that sort of stuff. So that has to take precedent, which means there are times that things that should be done here get neglected. I think fundamentally at its heart, permaculture is trying to address that issue. The way it was addressed in the 20th century in particular, well, and probably much longer than that, is specialization. So rather than try to manage everything all at once, you say, okay, Pete up there is growing grain, and he can grow enough wheat for the entire community and to sell the excess down at the. So we have a collective grain silo that's set up, and then we'll start buying from different farmers, but it's collected. And we don't worry about buying Pete's wheat versus buying Steve's wheat versus buying Mary's wheat. We just buy wheat from the co-op. And that model of specialization has proven to be effective. Now, if you're doing this and you're unwrapping that specialization, you're saying, I'm going to be a generalist, it does increase the complexity of the operation. And permaculture tries at its heart to help with that. So there are some ideas like about intermodal planting, companion planting, or one of the big ideas in permaculture is food forests. We can return to that one in a second. And these different things that people use to try to manage the systems and have them actually help each other. So ideally, when you get the system in place, they're boostering, but that might take time. For example, one of the big principles here on this farm is moving away from industrial mined fertilizer. So our source of fertilizer is rabbits. We're going to talk about this a lot more, but rabbits are the most efficient producers of fertilizer that there are. And what they can do in the abstraction is they can take things that are marginally useful for human beings, and they can turn those into fertilizer, which we can then use to produce our food. So one of the permaculture foundational principles on this little farm is to not have to import and use fertilizer from outside of this space. Now, we're not there 100%. We're a long ways there, but that's from a few years of gathering the manure from the rabbits. So you have to have that for a long time in place to generate enough bunny poop to actually make a dent. And that's the permaculture startup cost of saying, well, it's going to take you a few years to even get to the point where you need to be. So you're going to have to bridge the work. You're going to have to bring in fertilizer from outside in the beginning, at least. And you are probably not for years of practicing going to even know how much you need. How many rabbits do you need for, let's say, 2,000 square feet of gardens? I don't know the answer to that. So I'm playing it loose. At some point, I would like to be able to convert what I'm doing into real research and really be able to say things like that this is the formula I found, that a single rabbit can effectively, ooh, you're a bad boy. Oh, wow. A single rabbit can keep, let's say, 100 square feet of gardens in fertilizer. So that's where I want to get to in the longer run, of being able to say things like that. And one of the reasons I put this stuff out there and I reach out to communities is I'd love to establish a network of people who are doing experimentation that are following more rigorous scientific methodologies, and again, peer reviewing to whatever degree that is, saying, hey guys, here's the findings I found on a small scale, because most scientists are getting funded by great big industries who have different levels of questions. So there's just not a lot of market or money out there for figuring out how to better do very small. Okay, well, I guess these are the perils of using equipment out in the field. That's right where the recording ended. And I think you can follow what I was trying to say is it's hard to get a scientific approach when there is just a small scale of people doing things without grants and funding and universities and all that behind you, especially without industrial funding. Yeah, that was me weeding the strawberries, and I hope you heard the rooster crowing in the background as I was out there in the morning. Thanks again for your attention. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me at john@johnlarson.org. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.